There is a silence beneath all sound, a stillness deeper than any peace you have ever known. It does not announce itself with thunder, nor arrive with fanfare. It is soft, like the hush before dawn, ancient, like the breath of the stars. And in that silence, if you are very still, very open, very surrendered, you will hear it, not with your ears, but with the soul behind your ribs. You have spoken to God, haven't you? In whispered prayers on tired nights, in desperate pleas when all else failed, in gratitude so full it broke you open. And perhaps you thought that was the end of the conversation. That prayer was the full extent of the dialogue. But there is more. There is another voice, one that does not come from you but moves through you. A voice not born of thought, but of knowing. It is what we call intuition. And intuition is not you talking to God. Intuition is God talking to you. It does not shout. It will never compete with the noise. It will not argue with your mind. It waits gently until you remember to be still enough to listen. This is the great reversal. We were taught to reach for answers outside of ourselves, to consult the world, to ask the experts. But the sacred truth, the liberating, terrifying, empowering truth, is that the guidance you seek is not elsewhere. It is already within, not because you are special, but because you are divine. You always have been. You only forgot. And so you pray. Beautiful. Prayer is the soul's exhale, the sacred yearning turned into words, the humble bow of a heart remembering its source. But prayer is only half of the miracle. The other half is listening. And listening requires surrender, not to a dogma, not to a belief system, but to the mysterious presence within you that always knows. The one who already sees the path even when your eyes are clouded by fear. The one who whispers, "This way," even when logic screams, "That way." The one who asks for your trust, not because it needs it, but because you do. You have called this presence many names: soul, higher self, spirit, but it is all one voice, all one current, all one divine intelligence expressing itself through your unique form. And when you stop demanding that life make sense on your terms, when you stop insisting that the mind alone should lead, that voice rises. It is not new. It did not arrive when you became spiritual. It did not show up after the healing began. It was there in childhood when you followed what felt good without explanation. It was there in moments of crisis when something told you to turn left instead of right. It was there in the stillness between heartbreaks, holding you together while you fell apart. This voice, this intuition, is not learned. It is remembered. And when you remember, you awaken. You awaken not into new information, but into the felt experience that you are not separate from the source, that you have never been, that every breath is divine, that every moment carries the guidance you seek if you are only willing to slow down enough to feel it. You were taught to pray up as if God were far above. But God is not far. God is nearer than your next breath, closer than your next thought, more intimate than your next heartbeat. When you pray, you are not speaking to something outside yourself. You are turning inward toward the infinite that lives and moves and has its being within you. And when you hear that whisper, the one that makes no sense to the mind but feels like truth in the bones you are being spoken to, that is God's reply. That is intuition, and it is holy. You were not sent here to navigate life with only your five senses. You were not born to depend solely on maps drawn by others. The divine, in its infinite love, placed within you a compass, a sacred, silent knowing that cannot be proven, only trusted. It is not loud, because truth does not shout. It is not dramatic, because love does not perform. But it is always there, constant, clear, a presence that guides not through fear, but through resonance. It doesn't explain, it confirms. It doesn't argue, it aligns. When you hear it, it feels like a breath you didn't know you were holding has finally been released. And yet, how often have you doubted it? How often have you silenced the whisper because it did not make sense? Because it contradicted what others expected? Because it didn't fit the narrative you were taught to follow? You chose logic over love, safety over surrender, approval over authenticity, and still the whisper remained, not to punish you, not to control you, but because it is your birthright, your inheritance. The still small voice of God, echoing through your being, waiting to be remembered. Intuition is not a superpower for the gifted few. It is the native language of your soul. It is not mystical. It is natural. Not magical. It is inevitable. Every creature in the forest follows it. Every wave in the ocean honors it. Every star obeys it. Only humans have forgotten, because only humans have been taught to fear the inner voice more than the outer noise. But the moment you return to that voice, truly return, something miraculous happens. The world no longer feels like a maze. Your choices no longer feel like burdens. Your path no longer feels like a mystery. Because you are no longer trying to figure it all out, you are allowing it to unfold from within. This is not passivity. This is power. This is not blindness. This is vision. The kind of vision that sees not with the eyes, but with the heart. The kind that recognizes truth without needing to prove it. The kind that does not require evidence, because it already knows. There is a kind of wisdom that cannot be learned, only received. A wisdom that flows in when the mind grows quiet and the heart becomes soft. That wisdom is the voice of God speaking through your intuition. And it does not come to control you, but to liberate you. It says you are not lost. You are being led. It says you are not broken. You are breaking open. It says you are not alone. I have always been here. The ego will argue. It will demand clarity. It will seek guarantees. But intuition offers none of that. Intuition offers only the next breath, the next step, the next nudge toward love. And that is enough. That is always enough. Because when you follow the whisper, you walk not by sight, but by faith, not faith in an idea, but faith in a presence that lives and breathes through you. You don't need to understand it. You need only to trust it. You don't need to explain it to others. You need only to honor it within yourself. And when you do, life begins to organize itself around your alignment. Not instantly, not always comfortably, but undeniably, doors open, people appear, events align, not because you manipulated them into place, but because you return to the current of life that was always flowing in your favor. Every time you honor your intuition, you deepen your conversation with God. Every time you listen to that still small voice, you affirm that you are not alone, that you are not abandoned, that you are not separate from the infinite. You are the infinite, expressed through form, guided from within, protected by a presence that knows the entire map even when you see only one step. Prayer is the sacred offering of your truth to the divine. Intuition is the divine's sacred reply. And it is time you listen. There is something sacred that begins to unfold when you stop needing signs and start trusting the stirrings. When you no longer wait for the world to confirm your path, but simply walk it because it feels like home. You see, intuition is not here to make sense, it is here to make you whole. It does not arrive to convince the mind. It arises to awaken the soul. It speaks in the language of resonance, not rationale. It moves in the direction of alignment, not approval. It is the voice of the infinite, reminding the finite self that it was never truly small. And yet we are taught to override this voice with noise, with data, with the opinions of those who do not live in our skin. We are told to mistrust the unseen, to bow only to what can be measured and proven. But what is proof to a soul that knows? What is evidence to a heart that remembers? The deepest truths of your life, the ones that shaped you, healed you, transformed you, they did not come with blueprints. They came as sudden clarity, as quiet recognition, as the undeniable knowing that something sacred was moving through you. You are not meant to navigate this life by logic alone. You are meant to feel your way through like a blindfolded child walking a path guided only by light within. That inner light is not fragile, it is eternal. And every time you honor it, your path becomes less about striving and more about surrendering, less about controlling outcomes and more about aligning with origins. Intuition is not another tool in your toolbox. It is the thread that connects you to the whole. It is how the divine breathes into your daily life. Not in grand visions or angelic choirs, but in simple nudges, a sudden unease that pulls you back from danger, a gentle push to speak up when silence feels safer, a quiet peace that settles over you when you finally say yes to what your soul has been whispering all along. You may call it guidance, but it is more than that. It is communion. It is your part of the conversation with the infinite. You are not just receiving wisdom, you are remembering it. You are not just being led, you are being reunited with your own divine rhythm. and that rhythm does not falter. It does not lie. It does not change with the weather of your emotions. It remains steady, even as the waves rise. When you live by intuition, your life becomes less about seeking answers and more about trusting the questions. You stop demanding certainty and begin cultivating faith, not blind faith, but sacred recognition. Recognition that life is not random, that your presence here is not accidental, and that the compass within you is not faulty. It is flawless. It is ancient. It is the echo of the source within your own soul. And when you move from that space, when your steps are not dictated by fear but directed by alignment, you begin to understand that success is not a destination. It is a frequency. Peace is not the reward at the end of obedience. It is the companion of authenticity. Joy is not reserved for those who achieve enough. It is the inheritance of those who trust enough. You will never find your path in another's certainty. You will find it in your own sacred uncertainty, where the mind lets go and the heart takes the lead. Where you are no longer navigating life like a battlefield, but dancing through it like a sacred ceremony. Where each moment becomes less about proving and more about presence. For this is what it means to live from within. Not to reject the world, but to no longer be governed by it. Not to abandon reason, but to let reason follow intuition, not lead it. You are not here to be guided solely by what others have seen. You are here to awaken to what only you can feel. And what you feel, what rises from the silence of your own soul, that is where God speaks. There comes a point in every awakened life when the external noise becomes unbearable, not because it grows louder, but because the soul grows quieter. It is not that the world becomes more chaotic, but that your inner ear becomes more attuned to harmony. And the disharmony of outer demands, the deadlines, the expectations, the identities you've outgrown begin to fall out of tune with your essence. This dissonance is not a problem to fix. It is a signal, a sacred calling. It is your intuition alerting you. The time has come to return home. Not to the home built of bricks and borders, but to the home behind your ribs, the sanctuary that cannot be seen but can be felt, the temple not made with hands but with presence. Your intuition is the voice that lives in that home. It is not concerned with how things appear. It is only concerned with whether you are aligned. And alignment is not performance, it is integrity. It is not being right, it is being real. And so you begin to notice things you once ignored. The fatigue that isn't just tiredness, it's your soul saying no. The longing that isn't just dissatisfaction, it's your soul pulling you toward truth. The discomfort that doesn't mean you're broken, it means you're expanding. Your intuition speaks not in commands, but in currents. It does not demand, it draws. It does not scold, it nudges. And the more you honor it, the more the world around you begins to shift. What once felt essential validation, applause, conformity begins to feel empty. What once seemed risky slowness, solitude, honesty begins to feel like salvation. You are not becoming someone else. You are shedding the noise that kept you from yourself. This is not reinvention, it is remembrance. And what you remember is that you were never meant to live by default. You were meant to live by design, not someone else's design, divine design, sacred design, your soul's design. When you start following this inner voice, life does not necessarily get easier, but it does become lighter. There may still be grief, but it will no longer drown you. There may still be uncertainty, but it will no longer paralyze you. Because something within you knows you are no longer alone on this path. You never were. You are no longer forcing your way through. You are being led by a presence that does not sleep, led by a voice that never forgets who you are, even when you do. And this voice, your intuition, does not promise comfort. It promises truth. It will not protect you from every wound, but it will ensure that every wound becomes sacred. That every experience, whether celebrated or mourned, will become part of the tapestry being woven through you. You will look back on decisions that made no sense to your mind, yet felt undeniably right. You will look back on the moments you said yes to something invisible, only to realize later that it was your soul saying yes to itself. That is what intuition does. It bypasses the intellect, bypasses the fear, and speaks directly to the truth of who you are becoming. It does not operate in timelines, it does not check the clocks. It speaks from eternity and guides you moment by moment into more of yourself. This is why we must learn to listen again, not casually but reverently, as if every whisper were a scripture, as if every nudge were a verse in the gospel of your own becoming. Because it is. Because the sacred does not only live in holy books, it lives in your breath. It lives in the way your heart speeds up when truth draws near. It lives in the goosebumps that rise when your spirit hears something it recognizes. That recognition is intuition. And that intuition is God reminding you, I am here, not up there. In here, not someday. Now. And the now is holy. The now is where the conversation unfolds. The now is where heaven is not a destination, but a vibration, a frequency you tune into when you quiet the noise and open your heart to what's already been whispering all along. There comes a season in your awakening where you begin to trust without proof, to move without permission, to speak without rehearsing. Not because you become reckless, but because you become rooted. The roots of your being no longer cling to the soil of public opinion or borrowed beliefs. They drink instead from the subterranean river of divine knowing. And when that river begins to flow freely through you, intuition no longer feels like guidance, it feels like breath. Natural, necessary, effortless. It is not a separate voice you hear, it is your own voice, uncluttered by fear. It is not a foreign signal you interpret, it is your natural frequency, finally uninterrupted. You do not need to decode it. You only need to stop distorting it. The distortions come from the noise, the conditioning that told you to mistrust yourself, to look outward for confirmation, to abandon your truth in exchange for temporary safety. But what is safety if it costs your soul? What is approval if it requires silence where your voice was meant to rise? And so intuition begins, not as thunder, but as tremor, a small vibration in your chest, a subtle warmth in your belly, a shift in energy that says this is the way, not with certainty, but with clarity, not with maps, but with magnetism. You feel drawn, pulled, guided, not by logic's hand, but by love's invitation. This is the sacred geometry of your spirit at work. An invisible architecture, building a life from within, shaping choices not from scarcity, but from wholeness. You begin to live from alignment rather than reaction. And in that space, miracles become normal. Not the grand gestures that defy physics, but the quiet recalibrations that defy fear. A person you needed appears. A door gently closes that was never yours. A long-awaited peace begins to rest in your body. Not because everything is resolved, but because you are no longer resisting what is. You are in union with a current, and in this current, prayer and intuition merge. Prayer is no longer a performance, it is a posture, a sacred yielding. You no longer ask to be saved, you ask to be shown. You no longer beg for a plan, you open to the path that is already forming beneath your feet. You begin to understand that you were never meant to manipulate your life into place. You were meant to tune into its unfolding. This unfolding is not passive, it is profoundly alive. You still act, you still choose, you still create. But no longer from panic, no longer from scarcity. Your movements become extensions of your essence, not reactions to your fear. You no longer strive to be seen, you radiate from having seen yourself. You no longer push to be heard, you speak from the echo of something eternal that already said, you are. And in that echo, you remember, you are not here to be anything other than what you already are. You are not a project to be perfected, you are a presence to be embodied. The more you shed the need to become, the more you return to being. And being is the most revolutionary act in a world addicted to becoming. Being is not stillness for stillness' sake. It is stillness that reveals motion born of truth. This is the rhythm intuition leads you into. Not a sprint, not a retreat, but a dance. Sometimes bold, sometimes still, but always synchronized with the divine music that only you can hear. And if others do not hear it, bless them. They are dancing to their own sacred song. You do not need agreement to walk your path. You need integrity. And intuition is the compass that ensures that integrity remains intact. When you live like this, you do not become immune to pain, but you become fluent in its messages. You do not avoid the dark, but you no longer mistake it for the absence of light. You see that the night too is sacred, that the unknown is not an enemy, but a womb. That intuition often sounds like silence, because silence is where the deepest truths emerge. You begin to reframe uncertainty not as a void, but as a sanctuary. Not as failure, but as freedom. You stop needing every step to be lit because you trust the source of the light within you. And you stop looking at others to tell you who you are because you've heard the whisper for yourself. You've felt the sacred pull. You've touched the river of truth that flows beneath all things. And once you touch it, you can never go back. So you bless the questions, you honor the pauses, you walk into the unknown, not with fear, but with reverence. And as you do, you no longer just believe in God, you become aware that you are being breathed by God, that each moment of alignment is a holy dialogue, that each intuitive nudge is not random, it is revelation. The divine does not speak in lightning bolts, it speaks in you. You are the continuation of the prayer. You are the unfolding answer. Because what begins as a whisper becomes a way of life. At first, it is delicate, a flicker in the wind, a barely noticeable pull in the chest, a subtle vibration that trembles just beneath thought. But the more you follow it, the more you find that it never truly leaves. It grows not louder, but truer, not more forceful, but more constant. And you, the once hesitant listener, become its sacred companion. You become the tuning fork for divine intelligence. You stop searching for miracles because your life becomes one, not because everything is perfect, but because everything is aligned. There is no separation between the spiritual and the ordinary. That was a myth you were sold by a world that did not yet know its own holiness. But the soul remembers. It always remembers. That sacred stillness is not reserved for mountaintops or monasteries. It lives in the grocery line, in the way you speak to the stranger, in the pause before you answer your child. Intuition begins to shape your presence, and your presence becomes your offering. You realize that the divine does not want performance. It wants participation. It wants you as you are, where you are, attuned and available. And this is when life starts to rearrange itself, not because you forced it, but because you finally aligned with what was true all along. Relationships shift. Some fall away with grace, some with thunder, but always something clearer rises in their place. Work begins to feel different. No longer just a task, but an extension of your frequency. Your inner life becomes your compass, and your outer world becomes a mirror. You stop managing appearances and start stewarding energy. You begin to care less about how things look and more about how they feel. This is the beginning of real power. You see, the world cannot give you what it did not place in you. And what is in you, this sacred intuition, this divine inner knowing, was not planted by man. It was placed there by the same intelligence that paints sunsets without ever asking for applause. And like the sunset, your job is not to be understood. It is to be true. You are not here to fit in, but to radiate. And that radiance comes not from effort, but from trust. Not from striving, but from surrender. Intuition is the art of surrendering to the frequency of your own truth, over and over again, until your whole life hums with the resonance of the real. There is an unmistakable peace that comes when you begin to trust the voice within more than the voices without. Not a peace that ignores pain, but one that makes space for it. Not a peace that bypasses life, but one that breathes through it. This peace does not mean the absence of challenge. It means the presence of alignment. And alignment is everything. When you are aligned, your steps are guided, your speech is purposeful, your silence is sacred. You no longer need to rush into the next moment to feel whole, because you have returned to the only place where life truly happens. Now, and here in this sacred now, you begin to hear God not just in intuition, but in everything. In the way the trees lean into the wind, in the way grief opens you without warning, in the way laughter breaks through your weariness like sunlight through storm clouds. You realize that the voice of the divine is not distant. It is present in the marrow of each moment, if only you dare to be present with it. And so prayer changes too. It is no longer just asking, it becomes listening. No longer just speaking, it becomes surrendering. You stop praying for outcomes and start praying for alignment. You stop asking for life to bend to your will and start opening to the will that already knows your path more intimately than you ever could. Prayer becomes less of a request and more of a relationship. And in that relationship, intuition becomes your sacred language. The subtle way the infinite speaks through the finite, leading you not toward perfection, but toward presence. And in presence, you remember, you were never chasing clarity, you were chasing connection. Not connection to a plan, but to a presence. Not to answers, but to awareness. And now here you are, not at the end, but in the center. Not finished, but finally beginning, not beginning, a new life, but beginning to live the one that has always been yours. You were never meant to navigate alone, because prayer is you talking to God, and intuition is God talking to you. There will come a time, and perhaps that time is now, when you will stop asking if you are on the right path and begin to trust that the path is made right by your presence upon it. You will no longer wonder if you've missed your purpose, for you will have realized your purpose is to be aligned with your inner truth, and that truth is forever unfolding. You are not a traveler chasing destinations. You are the awakening of the road itself. Each step you take in alignment with your intuition is a step into sacred ground, and sacred ground is not somewhere you arrive at, it's what you create with your presence. And so the old way of living begins to fall away, not with a crash, but with a sigh. The self that had to prove, to chase, to earn, to be seen, it begins to dissolve like mist in the morning Sunday. What remains is not a smaller you, but the real you. The you that does not need to be explained because it is felt. The you that does not need to be defended because it is truth. The you that does not shout because it radiates. This self does not hunger because it remembers, I am already what I seek. I do not need to find the divine. I am a living expression of it. In this remembrance, life softens, not because challenges disappear, but because you stop struggling against them. You begin to see even difficulty as divine orchestration, not punishment, but preparation. Not chaos, but calling. And your intuition continues to guide you, not as a roadmap, but as a rhythm. Not as a loud announcement, but as a gentle direction, felt only when you are still enough to receive. And what does it mean to be still? It means to stop fleeing, to stop rushing toward futures that promise what your own soul already holds, to stop escaping the present moment as though your divinity were waiting somewhere else. Stillness is not the absence of motion, it is the fullness of presence. And presence is where the voice of God is clearest, because God does not need to shout when you are already listening. You see, the divine has been speaking to you since before you knew what listening was. In the ache that told you you were meant for more. In the yearning that whispered there was something sacred in your sorrow. In the unexplainable pull toward people, places, paths that seemed irrational but felt like home. That was God. Not testing you, not confusing you. Guiding you through intuition back to yourself. And now, you are learning to trust that voice more than the noise. You are learning to follow what you feel, even when it goes against what you've been taught. You are learning to answer to your soul, not to your fears. And as you do, you become more than a seeker. You become an instrument, a vessel, a living prayer. Because prayer, beloved, is not just words. It is your breath. It is your stillness. It is your choices made in truth. And intuition is not a luxury. It is your native language. It is the divine loving you in real time, speaking through the whisper behind your thoughts, the knowing behind your mind. You are never without guidance. You are never without connection. You only believed you were. Now, you remember, and what you remember is peace. Not a peace dependent on circumstance, but one born of surrender. You stop needing guarantees and begin walking in trust. You stop needing the world to validate your direction, because your soul already has. You stop seeking the light and finally allow yourself to be it. The shift is not something you force, it is something you allow. The real you is not found, it is revealed. And it was never far, it was always here. Closer than breath, quieter than thought, more faithful than the sunrise. So now you bow not in defeat, but in devotion. You place your hand on your heart and know, I am not waiting for guidance. I am living it. I am not separate from God. I am the space through which God expresses. I am not becoming. I am remembering. And so, let your life become the prayer. Let your breath become the altar. Let your intuition become the voice of the divine rising from within. Let your stillness be the sanctuary. And let your presence be the answer to the prayer you once whispered into the sky. Because prayer is you talking to God. And intuition is God talking to you. And now, you are listening. There is a timeless truth pulsing beneath all the noise of this world, waiting patiently, quietly for your remembrance. It is not something that can be earned, acquired, or understood by the intellect. It is only felt, known, lived. It is this: you are always connected to Source. Not sometimes, not when you meditate, not when you're perfect, not when you're healed, always. Even in your most anxious thoughts, even in the shadowed corners of grief, even in your forgetting, you are still connected, because the connection was never yours to create. It is yours to remember. Like a wave is never separate from the ocean, though it may feel apart in its rising and falling, so too are you never apart from the divine that breathes through your every moment. The Tao calls it the Great Way. Jesus spoke of the Father within. Rumi sang of the Beloved. But these are only names for the same sacred truth. The infinite lives within you, moves through you, and has never left. Yet how often we forget. How easily we get lost in the illusion of separation, as if our worth depends on our achievements, our validation, our image. As if we are fragments needing to earn our way back to the whole. But you were never fragmented. You were born whole, formed in the image of something immeasurable, indestructible, eternal. You are not a stranger to God. You are God in expression. A spark of the infinite cloaked in form. You are the extension of love into time and space. The ego will shout, "You are alone. You are incomplete. You must strive to be worthy." But the soul knows better. The soul whispers, "You are already worthy. You have never been alone. You were created from worthiness itself." And so the path is not about becoming, it is about remembering. Unlearning the noise, peeling back the false layers, dissolving the illusions that keep you striving for what you already are. The tree does not try to be a tree, it simply allows the life force to move through it. The river does not ask, "Am I enough?" It flows, because that is its nature. And so too are you meant to flow not with resistance, not with striving, but with trust, with surrender. With a quiet knowing that you are already carried by something vast, loving, and wise beyond measure. This connection is not conditional. It does not vanish when you doubt. It does not weaken when you fall. Like the sun behind the clouds, it is always shining. Your awareness of it may flicker, but the light remains. And when you return to this remembrance, when you sit in stillness and feel the hum of life pulsing in your chest, you come home. Home not as a place, but as a state of being. A sacred inner dwelling where nothing is missing and nothing needs to be added. You begin to see that everything you've been chasing was never outside of you. Love, peace, joy, they are not rewards, but states of alignment. And alignment is not found in perfection, but in presence. In saying yes to this moment exactly as it is. In trusting the divine rhythm even when the melody feels unfamiliar. Do not wait for the storm to pass before you remember the Sunday. Do not wait for the world to applaud before you honor your own light. Right now in this breath, you are enough. Not because of what you've done, but because of what you are. A child of the cosmos, a vessel of the sacred, a unique note in the eternal symphony of existence. You do not need to do more to be more. You only need to surrender the thought that you are anything less than divine. And yes, the world will pull you back into forgetting. The noise will rise, the doubt will creep. But let each moment of forgetting become an invitation not to shame yourself, but to return. Return to the breath. Return to the now. Return to the quiet, knowing that beneath every thought, every fear, every story, there is a stillness, a presence, a source that has never left you. It waits in the pause between words. It lives in the space between heartbeats. It rises in the silence you've been taught to fear and whispers, "You are not alone." The work is not to find this source, but to feel it, to trust it, to live from it. And from that place, everything changes not because the world shifts, but because your eyes do. You begin to see beauty in the mundane. You find grace in the breakdown. You forgive more easily, not because the other deserves it, but because your peace does. You love without condition, because you've stopped needing others to fill a cup that was never empty. This is the freedom that cannot be taken. The peace that surpasses understanding, the power of one who remembers who they are. You are not the waves that crash. You are the ocean beneath. You are not the roles you've played. You are the awareness watching them unfold. You are not the pain you've carried. You are the space that can hold it all without being broken. So return, again and again return, to stillness, to silence, to the sacred space within where Source lives and breathes and loves through you. You are always connected, even when you forget, even when you fall, even when you doubt, especially then, because Source is not something outside to be reached. It is the very essence of what you are. And to live from that truth is not arrogance, it is humility. The humility of surrender. The humility of saying yes to what already is. The humility of living as the light you've been seeking. So be still, be open, be present. And remember, you are not separate. You never were, you never will be. You are always already eternally connected to Source. There is no greater illusion than the idea that you are alone, that you are separate from the whole, that you must reach or strive or prove your way back into belonging. That illusion is the root of every ache, every fear, every war that rages silently inside the human heart. But peel back that illusion, breathe beyond that veil, and what you will discover is not distance but union. You are not a solitary flame flickering in the dark. You are the fire itself, burning with the same essence that ignites the stars. Every breath you take is the universe breathing through you. Every heartbeat is a signature of Source declaring, I am here. I have always been here. And when you pause, truly pause, you will feel it. In the stillness behind your thoughts, in the quiet space between one worry and the next. In that sacred silence, there is something vast and unshakable waiting for your attention. It is not asking you to be better. It is asking you to be present, because the soul does not evolve by force. It remembers by surrender. It awakens by stillness. And in that awakening, there is no more need to perform. You realize that your value was never tied to your productivity. Your worth was never measured in accomplishments. The divine never asked you to be impressive, only to be real. To be as you are, here, now, without disguise. The ego, clever and frightened, will try to convince you otherwise. It will say you are disconnected. It will whisper that you are missing something, that you must acquire more knowledge, more success, more validation before you can be whole. But that voice is not truth. It is only a shadow passing across the mirror of your being. And the mirror has never stopped reflecting light, even when you thought it was broken, even when you forgot how to look. What you feel as longing is not evidence of absence. It is the song of remembrance. The yearning in your chest is not the cry of emptiness, but the voice of Source calling you inward. You ache not because you are lost, but because you are being invited home. And what is this home? It is not a place. It is not a state of perfection. It is not some future version of yourself you must evolve into. Home is the truth that you are enough as you are in this breath. Home is the deep knowing that nothing in the universe has ever been separate from you. That the galaxies turn, the winds move, the rivers flow not apart from you, but as you. That you are not in life, you are life. Not a part of God, but God unfolding through form. When you live from this truth, the world does not suddenly become perfect, but it becomes sacred. Every encounter becomes a mirror. Every moment becomes a message. Even the pain, especially the pain, becomes a portal. And in the heart of that portal, there is an opening. A space so wide, so soft, so holy, that nothing need be changed to be blessed. You will walk through suffering, not as a victim, but as a vessel. You will hold space for grief, not as a curse, but as a teacher. You will no longer ask, why is this happening to me? But how is this serving the remembering of who I truly am? And the answer will rise not always in words, but in stillness, in trust, in the quiet certainty that you are not navigating this life alone. That the same intelligence that orchestrates the dance of the planets is guiding you to, not through thunder, but through whispers, not through maps, but through inner alignment. Do not be deceived by the noise of the world. It will distract you, seduce you, make you doubt your own light. But your light cannot be extinguished. It may flicker in the winds of change, but it cannot die. It is eternal. It is sacred. It is the presence of Source within you. And when you rest in that presence, you are free, not because the world agrees with you, but because your being no longer depends on agreement. The sun does not need validation to shine. The ocean does not apologize for its depth. And you do not need to shrink to be accepted. You do not need to become something else to be divine. You already are. The work is not to become, it is to unveil, to allow, to remember. And in that remembering, to return to the rhythm of your own soul. So return, and return again, as often as it takes. Each breath is a doorway. Each moment is an invitation. Let the world spin. Let others rush. Let the mind chatter. But you be still. Be deep. Be present. You are not here to perform a role. You are here to live a truth. And that truth is this: you are always connected to Source. Always. Even now. Especially now. There will come a moment when all your seeking will soften into silence. Not because you have given up the search, but because you finally recognize there was never a distance to cross. In that silence, something ancient and undeniable will arise, not a voice, not a thought, but a presence. A presence that feels like home, yet deeper than any home you've known in form. It is the presence that existed before your name was spoken into the world, before your first breath. It is the presence of the infinite whispering through the chambers of your being, not demanding, not instructing, just being. And in that sacred presence, there is nothing to fix, nothing to chase, nothing to fear. When you live from this presence, even the act of breathing becomes sacred. You begin to notice the subtle grace in all things, the way a leaf catches the light, the hush of dawn before the world begins to stir, the pause in your chest when someone looks at you with truth in their eyes. These are not small things, they are everything. They are the fingerprints of Source, reminding you in the softest of ways, I am with you, I am within you, I have never been apart. Oh, there is a rhythm to the universe, a pulse that moves through stars and seasons, rivers and roots, and it moves through you too. Not in moments of enlightenment only, but in the ordinary, the overlooked, the mundane. You are not meant to escape this world to find your divinity. You are meant to infuse the world with it, to walk the grocery aisles with sacred feet, to speak to your neighbor with holy breath, to answer the phone not with annoyance, but with presence. The spiritual path is not a separate road, it is this road, walked with awareness, lived with love. And yes, there will be days when the fog rolls in again, when the weight of human experience feels too heavy to bear. Do not resist those days. Do not shame yourself for feeling low. Even the moon disappears from the sky, but it never stops being the moon. You too are allowed to wax and wane. You too are allowed to rest in the dark and trust the light will return. The connection to Source is not weather. It is the sky itself. And you are never apart from it, even when you cannot see the stars. Begin to trust what arises when you are still. Not what the world tells you to be, but what you feel in the quiet moments between striving. That is the voice of your being, unconditioned, unafraid, unclothed by judgment. That voice does not yell, it does not try to persuade. It simply is, like the mountain, like the sea, like love that asks for nothing in return. When you honor that voice, not just with your ears, but with your life, you begin to live from truth rather than from habit, and truth will carry you farther than any plan ever could. There is no map for this journey, because the journey is inward. No one else can walk it for you. No title can define it. No doctrine can contain it. You are the sacred scripture. You are the living prayer, and the more you embody that truth, the more you radiate it without effort. Not as a lesson to teach, but as a light to share. People will feel it, not because you speak of Source, but because you live as one who remembers. This remembrance is not pride, it is humility. The humility of standing barefoot on the earth and knowing it is holy. The humility of waking up each day and choosing to be kind, not because the world deserves it, but because your soul does. The humility of letting go, not of dreams, but of the grasping that makes you forget the miracle already in your hands. You are always connected. Let that be the truth you wake into each morning, the peace you return to in the hush of night. Let it shape your days, soften your judgments, quiet your fears. Let it be the invisible thread that weaves your ordinary moments into something sacred. You need not understand it to live it. You need not master it to trust it. You need only remember again and again that nothing real can be taken from you. Because what is real is what you are. What is real is eternal. And so, breathe. Not to get anywhere, but to arrive. You are here, you are held, you are whole, and the Source that brought you forth has never let you go. You are not here by accident. Not a single breath you've taken has been outside the design of something vast, intelligent, and loving beyond comprehension. There is a divine choreography unfolding beneath the surface of your life, even when the steps feel disjointed or lost in chaos. You are part of a sacred movement, a cosmic unfolding that is not measured by your productivity or your popularity. but by your presence, by how deeply you inhabit the now, by how fully you allow yourself to be a conduit not of the ego's ambition, but of the soul's remembrance. The mind will ask for explanations, but the soul moves through revelation. It reveals itself slowly, like the tide claiming the shore, not with fanfare, but with constancy. The ego builds towers and tries to reach heaven by climbing, but the soul knows that heaven was never above it, is within. You are not on a staircase to God. You are the doorway through which the divine enters this world. Every time you choose authenticity over approval, stillness over distraction, love over fear, you open that door a little wider. And when you open that door even a crack, life begins to meet you with a new rhythm. Not a rhythm of striving and scarcity, but of sufficiency, of grace. You begin to see that what you thought were obstacles were actually initiations, that what you feared as endings were thresholds into a deeper intimacy with the sacred. The delays, the detours, the closed doors, they were never rejections. They were redirections, guiding you not to a different path, but to your truest self. When you start to live from this inner knowing, everything becomes a messenger. The rain becomes a baptism. The heartbreak becomes a teacher. The silence becomes a sanctuary. And even the things that once made you doubt your worth begin to reveal their hidden grace. You stop asking life to validate you because you understand deeply, irrevocably that you are already valid. Not because of anything you've done, but because of what you are. And what you are is infinite, formless, sacred. This is not about ego inflation. This is not about declaring I am God as a crown to wear. It is about remembering that the divine lives through you, not just in moments of joy and clarity, but also in your trembling, in your confusion, in your breaking. The holiest moments of your life may not be the ones where you triumphed, but the ones where you surrendered, where you let go of trying to be invulnerable and instead let yourself be real. Realness is where the divine does its greatest work. Not in your performance, but in your presence. Not in your plans, but in your surrender. You do not need to be unshakable to be holy. You need only to be honest with yourself, with your source, with the moment. For honesty is the beginning of intimacy, and intimacy with the present moment is the portal to all healing. What you resist will persist, what you deny will grow louder. But what you welcome with awareness will begin to soften, begin to dissolve. Not because you conquered it, but because you held it in the light of love. Love is not something you must earn. It is the atmosphere of your soul, the nature of your being, the breath of source moving through you. You do not need to go somewhere to find love. You need only to stop running from yourself. And this is the deeper truth. The you that you've tried to escape, the one with doubts and scars and shadows, is not separate from the divine. It is not the enemy. It is the doorway. It is through your humanity, not in spite of it, that you will know God. Not the God in the sky, but the God in the tears, in the quiet, in the trembling voice that finally says, I am tired of pretending. I am ready to be seen. When you are seen, truly seen, not for who you try to be, but for who you are underneath it all, something miraculous happens. You begin to remember that your connection to Source was never based on how good you are, but on how real you are willing to be. The sacred does not flow to the polished, perfect parts of you. It flows to the open places, to the vulnerable, to the raw, to the parts you were taught to hide. And so I invite you now not to become more, but to become less entangled in roles, less attached to outcome, less imprisoned by the voice of fear. For what remains when all that falls away is not emptiness, it is freedom. The freedom of being exactly what you are without resistance. And in that freedom, you are not disconnected. You are most connected. There is no more to attain. There is only more to allow. Let your soul speak. Let your breath be enough. Let your presence fill the space without apology or hesitation. You are here. You are sacred. You are held in the eternal arms of a source that has never once forgotten your name. And now, neither do you. There is a turning point in the life of every soul, a quiet, unheralded shift, not marked by thunder or the applause of the world, but by the soft exhale that follows lifetimes of striving. It is the moment when you stop trying to become someone and begin the sacred act of unbecoming everything you were never meant to be. Not to lose yourself, but to find yourself beneath the noise. beneath the masks, beneath the inherited beliefs that told you love was conditional and worth had to be earned. This moment may arrive in silence, it may arrive in grief, but when it comes, you will know. Because it will feel like peace, not the peace of everything being perfect, but the peace of no longer needing it to be. This is the return, the homecoming, not to a place, but to an essence. And in this essence, there is no lack. There is no fear of being unseen, unloved, or unworthy, because you remember viscerally that you are not a visitor here. You are a spark of the very fire that created all things. Not merely a creation, but a creator. Not a body with a soul, but a soul expressing through a body. When you embody this truth, not just with your mind, but with your life, your entire relationship with reality begins to transform. You no longer hustle for belonging. You no longer twist yourself into palatable shapes to be loved. You no longer betray your own knowing to be accepted, because the need to prove disappears in the light of presence. And what remains is the quiet authority of a soul aligned. A being who no longer argues with the world, but lives as a blessing within it. And when you live as a blessing, even your silence speaks. Even your stillness heals. People around you may not understand it. They may ask what changed. But it will be hard to explain, because it is not something you did, it is something you allowed. You allowed the false to fall away. You allowed the pain to open you rather than harden you. You allowed source to enter through the cracks in your armor. And that light, once it enters, does not need to shout. It simply shines. You will begin to feel that everything you once resisted had a purpose, that even the heartbreak was a carving out of deeper capacity to love, that the delay was a protection, that the detour was not off your path, but was the path. And when you see your life through these eyes that no longer seek, but see, you realize there was never a need to chase the light. You were the light. Covered, yes. Forgotten often, but never absent. There is a sacred intelligence that lives in your bones, in your breath, in the center of your chest where no word has ever touched. This intelligence does not operate on the logic of fear. It speaks in resonance, in intuition, in the soft knowing that does not need to be explained. And the more you trust it, the more you find that life itself begins to cooperate with your soul's deepest longing. Not the longing of the mind, which is never satisfied, but the longing of the heart to simply be and be fully. This sacred intelligence is source itself moving through you as you. It is not a visitor. It is not a guest. It is the host, the home, the fire. And when you let it take the lead, when you stop trying to micromanage the mystery and instead bow to it, life becomes something entirely different. It becomes lighter. It becomes quieter. It becomes more meaningful, even in the mundane, because you are no longer living for approval. You are living from alignment. And alignment is everything. When you are aligned, you do not need to convince anyone of your path. Your path will speak for itself. You do not need to grasp at opportunities, they find you. You do not need to chase love, it arrives where it finds space. Because alignment is not about control, it is about consent. You give your consent to the divine to move through you, and in that surrender, you become unstoppable, not in the way the world defines it, but in the way the soul remembers it. You become rooted like the mountain, fluid like the river, soft like the moon. You stop fearing the unknown because you recognize yourself as part of it. You stop fearing change because you know what is real and you cannot be lost. And in this knowing, you live with a kind of freedom that cannot be described. It can only be felt. A freedom that has nothing to do with circumstances and everything to do with conscience. And consciousness, beloved soul, is the bridge between the seen and the unseen, between the identity you've performed and the truth you've always been, between the voice of the world and the whisper of the divine. The more conscious you become, the less you react and the more you respond. The less you grasp and the more you receive, the less you fear and the more you remember. You remember that this life, this sacred moment, is not a test, it is a gift. Not something to survive, but something to experience, to feel, to love, to walk through with open hands and a heart willing to be touched, because every experience, when met with presence, becomes a vehicle for awakening. And every soul you meet becomes a mirror reflecting the infinite in new form. So let the journey continue not from a place of urgency, but from a place of reverence. There is nowhere you need to get to. There is only here, only now. Only the quiet, radiant truth of who you are unfolding, breath by breath, as a living expression of the source that has always held you and never let you go. And now, as the final breath of this sacred unfolding draws near, let us not conclude, but return. Return not as who you were when these words first entered your heart, but as who you have remembered yourself to be. The one who was never lost, the one who never needed fixing, the one who has always been and will always be an emanation of the infinite. The journey was never about reaching some distant peak of perfection. It was about shedding, softening, releasing every false identity that clouded your inner light. And what remains is not a new version of you, but the real you, unveiled. The luminous soul that has walked with you through every dark night, through every lonely moment, through every question that was answered, not with words, but with presence. You do not need a spotlight to affirm your brightness. You are the light. You do not need accolades to know your worth. Your worth was woven into your being by something timeless, something sacred. You do not need to be chosen by the world. You have already been chosen by life, by love, by the divine breath that formed you from stardust and wonder and placed you gently on this earth to remember. You see, the sacred is not something you visit, it is something you live. Not in monasteries alone, but in grocery lines, in morning traffic, in the pause before a tender word. Enlightenment is not reserved for the mountaintop, it is revealed in the way you choose to show up to the smallest moments with the deepest presence. Because every moment is a doorway to the divine when entered with awareness. There is a holiness to your being that cannot be tarnished. There is a peace within you that no circumstance can steal. And there is a connection unchanging, unwavering, that binds you eternally to Source. You could forget it 1,000 times and it would still be here, waiting. Not with judgment, but with open arms. Not with expectation, but with love. Let that love be what guides you now. Not the kind the world sells, but the kind that simply is. Unconditional, expansive, boundless, the kind that radiates from your very existence. You were not created to chase love, you were created to be it, to breathe it, to offer it like sunlight, freely and without measure. And as you walk from this place, not as someone who has been filled, but as someone who has remembered the fullness already within you, will notice a quiet strength rising in you. A strength that does not come from force, but from alignment. A strength that does not shout, but anchors. That does not conquer, but creates. And you will no longer seek signs from the outside, because your inner knowing has become the clearest guidance. Life will still rise and fall. Days will still bring both light and shadow. But you will move through them not as a seeker in search of something missing, but as a soul resting in its own completeness. Because the searching has stilled, the veil has lifted, the noise has softened, and what remains is the simplest, most powerful truth you will ever know. You are always connected to Source. Even in the silence, even in the sorrow, even when you forget, especially then. And so now, beloved, rest, not in passivity, but in truth. Let your breath remind you, let your being embody it. Walk slowly, speak softly, love boldly. And let every step be an offering, not to earn your place, but to celebrate that you have always belonged. For you are not the seeker. You are the Source remembering itself. And now you remember.